recording and turning this over to Rasan Grant.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. We're so glad to have you this morning. This morning, we have Liz Werner from Lake County Housing Authority, and she's going to be presenting in this workshop, Thriving on a Tight Budget. I do want to let you know that we do have your email address, and at the end of this presentation, you will receive a copy of this presentation in a PDF format in your email, along with a survey. We value your feedback, so please fill out the survey. We would greatly appreciate it. I'll turn it over to Liz Werning from Lake County Housing Authority.
Good morning. Good morning, everybody. Again, welcome to our workshop, Thriving on a Tight Budget. So before we begin, everyone is muted, cameras are off. We're going to be recording, but please feel free to type in questions into the chat, and we're going to take a Q&A session after we're done. So next slide, please. Let's get us going. So my name is Liz Werning. I'm the manager of housing counseling programs and Pharah here at the Housing Authority, Lake County Housing Authority. Up on the screen, you're going to see my contact information, but as always, all LCHA staff contact info is found on our website. It's going to be under About Us, Staff Directory. We keep it up to date, so no matter if my phone number or anything like that changes, you'll be able to contact us. All housing counseling services seen on the left side of the screen are free and available to all Lake County residents. So if you know anybody who you think we're going to benefit from our services, please feel free, pass along our information. And of course, the link at the bottom of the page is our intake form for all one-on-one counseling services, which is on our website. And then we're going to drop it into the chat as well. Actually, throughout this entire presentation, we're going to be dropping a lot of links into the chat. So follow along, and we can provide those at the end as well, or you can just pull them from the chat as we go. Next slide, please. Perfect. So everything begins with numbers, which for our purpose means either a spending plan or an emergency budget. So what's the difference between the two as we see it? A spending plan is a long-term path to achieving larger financial goals and includes like discretionary items that aren't necessarily 100% vital to surviving. And those things are like luxury purchases, vacations, investments, etc. The emergency budget is what we're going to be focusing on today, and that is a survival plan. Both plans include the necessary items, the absolute necessities, but emergency budget slash and burns anything that isn't vital. It also focuses on the areas of spending that can be reduced through assistance plans. And that's going to be one of the things we focus on today as well. So if you want to download the budget that our housing counselors use when we do this one-on-one, you can do so at the link that's going to be dropped into the chat right now. And you can fill that out at your own discretion, what have you. Next slide, please. Thank you. All right, so an emergency budget is something that we're going to be approaching strategically. Otherwise, it can get really overwhelming and can cause a lot of anxiety. No matter who you are, stress, hard times can be overwhelming, and people tend to panic at the idea of these big changes, and an emergency budget requires a lot of big changes. So in housing counseling, what we do is say, let's approach every single goal, even if it's a tough one, by breaking it down into little pieces. And that we found tends to mitigate that anxiety. So in this case, those pieces, those steps are an analysis of spending, decreasing expenses where we can, and increasing income where we can. Next slide, please. All right, so that first step is an analysis of spending. So this seems kind of obvious to a lot of folks, but you'd be surprised at the items that we forget about because they're pushed into the back of our mind, that we put on auto pay and we just forget about. So in crisis, if we don't know that we are just about to be charged for a $99 per year Amazon, or maybe a subscription that we only pay every 6 months, something like that, that can be enough to destroy our budgets, to really offset us. So the best way to be determining what we were going to be paying and when is to find out where we have been spending that money. And we can do this by downloading, first step, downloading our bank statements, right? And that includes every type of bank statements. So that includes Zelle, PayPal, any other source of payment app, things like that. And we're going to review each line item and enter that into that comprehensive budget that represents those numbers. And again, you can find that downloadable budget on our website, and we're going to be putting in the chat again. So once you've got that budget and you've downloaded every single item that you have spent money on, once you've plugged that in, it is time for some honesty. So when we talk about honesty with ourselves, we talk about really looking at the needs, right? So we have to look at what qualifies as needs. Typically, that's going to be the absolute necessities. It's going to be housing, the cheapest and most reliable form of transportation, anything medical expenses, obviously you want to keep your health, food, and utilities. For an emergency budget, everything beyond that is wants. And granted, that is a dire, kind of horrible conclusion to come to, that everything beyond those real basic necessities is a want. But this is why an emergency budget is not a permanent budget. Really, we should just be looking at that 3 to 6 month period of time, because no person should be living on a bare bones budget like this for long. Okay, so now what do we do with those wants, right? For items that can be suspended for a few months, we're going to contact the provider and ask to cancel or suspend those services. Sometimes you can get a couple of months of free services out of that, but that's not something you should be expecting. Some things are going to need to be changed, reduced, or just canceled outright. And that might take some personal strength, because frankly, the things that typically need to be canceled or changed are the ones that we control and we have like a daily control over. And that's going to be stuff like our grocery budget, where we shop, whether it's an expensive store or a slightly less expensive store, where we eat in our homes, outside the homes, etc., and how we spend money emotionally, which is, of course, a very honest conversation we have to have with ourselves. And honestly, that is the most difficult part, breaking down what our habits are and how we spend that money. So having identified that those bare bones needs, it's time to assess how to decrease the monthly cost of those necessities. So doing this is going to provide us with the amount of income required to fulfill the emergency budget. And if we need to increase that income or increase our employment in order to meet that need, the income need. Next slide, please. Okay, so we're going to be getting to how to increase that income in just a smidge. But first, let's talk about reducing the expenses in the needs category. This is really what's going to take up a large amount of our time today. So let's begin with student loans. In the past couple of days, in the past week, we have had a couple of pieces of information about student loans. But as you may know, student loans currently are on pause until May 1st, 2022. So this may or may not get extended, but let's not expect it will. As of today, May 1st, 2022, they're on pause. So this applies to just federal loans at this point. So that's direct loans, federal family education loans, and federal Perkins loans. For these loans, that pause means that the loan payments are suspended, there's 0% interest rate, and the collections on any defaulted qualifying federal loans are going to stop until that date in May. So if you want to double check if your loans are on pause, if you don't know already, and really you should have been informed about this, but if you just want to check, please contact your servicer. So that could be a number of servicers, or a better way just to confirm is to visit studentaid.gov, which will drop into the chat again. So another approach is that you want to make sure that right now, especially if your income has been reduced, you get on what's called an income-based repayment plan. And really right now is the best time for that while those student loans are paused. So this step is more of a preventative measure to avoid being confronted with the expensive student loans when they come back online in May. But also it's wise to look at your income-based repayment plan and recertify for that anytime your income falls. You are allowed to come back to the IBR plans anytime your income is reduced, and you will automatically be recertified every year or so. If you do not negotiate an IBR plan, if you decide not to do that, if it's not in your best interest or what have you, you're still not going to resume those loans until May. So no matter what, it is on pause, no matter if you go into an IBR plan today or not. It's on to be on pause until May. So if you want to explore more information about the income-based repayment plans, we're going to drop a link into the chat. It's going to include like a simulator to find out like what your choices are and exactly the terminology based on it. Okay, so before moving on, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about the most recent Navient lawsuit. So that's something that's been in the news for a little bit, and we've gotten a lot of calls regarding it because it's a lot of confusing information. So, and also what borrowers need to do to access that loan forgiveness that's included in the Navient lawsuit, and if they're going to be getting any money back, and how do you go about accessing that. So it's a little different than a class action lawsuit where you have to register for it, right? Briefly, this is a real short review of what it is, right? So in Illinois, borrowers receiving private loan debt cancellation, you're going to receive a notification from Navient by July of this year, July 2022, along with a refund of any payment paid on a canceled private loan, which was canceled after June 30th, 2021. Some federal student loan borrowers are going to receive a restitution payment, so a refund effectively, of approximately $260. I've heard $240, $260, but you're going to be notified in the mail, USPS, via a postcard from the servicer, from Navient. And that's going to happen sometime in the spring. So to clarify, like I was just saying, you don't have to take any kind of action. You don't have to register, etc. All you have to make sure is that the studentaid.gov portal has your current address. A lot of folks have been moving lately. We've been shifting everything. Make sure that studentaid.gov has your current address so they can get you that postcard and get you that money if you deserve it, and also all your contact information. So no matter what, please don't pay anyone to apply on your behalf. There's a lot of scams that have popped up even as quickly as the Navient settlement went out. Please don't pay anyone. This is an automated situation. They already have all of your information because, of course, you took out that loan from them, so they know where you are. Don't pay anybody to apply for this. You don't have to. Please, please, please be mindful of scams. All right, forgive me. Moving on to credit debts. Over this past 2 years during the pandemic, there have been a lot of not debt forgiveness, but debt forbearance programs. A forbearance is a pause, just like the student loans we were talking about earlier. Forbearance is a pause on those credit debts. And a lot of credit lenders are still offering a COVID relief plans, which includes deferment, which puts that debt on the back end of your loan or your debt plan, whatever it is, interest rate reduction. You can negotiate a payment plan, and then term extension. So perhaps you had a car note with a term of 360 months. Now you have a car note of 720 months, what have you. So it is going to vary between the lenders, between your credit card lenders, your car note lenders, etc. So there's no real guaranteed fast, hard rules. You really do have to contact those specific lenders. So no matter if you negotiate or not, if you decide that minimum payments are the best thing you can afford, making those minimum payments on time is going to go a long way towards preserving your credit. Also, not overextending yourself, but that's an entirely different situation. Even if you don't negotiate, please make those minimum payments if you can, because that will go a long way towards preserving your credit and making sure that at the end of this emergency situation, you still have that intact. So you may need to eventually negotiate credit card through a consolidation organization. In that situation, I would highly advise going to a nonprofit credit counseling agency. We do have one in Lake County. There are some across the nation, but try to make sure it is a nonprofit and not one that is going to try to sell you a product as opposed to being there for your interests. But no matter what, the first step is really to reach out to that lender and see if you can negotiate some sort of pause or some sort of payment plan, etc. Now, regarding medical debts, there are a few ways to address existing costs and future costs. If you do have medical debts, I'm hoping and I encourage you to take two paths at the same time, two simultaneous paths. So firstly, see if your household qualifies for state insurance. The main reason is because many things are covered, obviously, but also they pay 3 months retroactively for medical costs. The link to the marketplace, which is the ABE site in Illinois, to apply for Medicaid, and the site for state insurance application assistance, there's a group that actually assists in your application, is going to be going into the chat right now too. So at the same time, what I'd like you to do is, while you apply for state assistance, contact the hospital. So if you have an existing bill out right now that has not gone to collections, collections is an entirely different thing that we can help you with. But if it has not gone to collections yet, it's still, the debt is still with the hospital, I want you to reach out to that hospital or the provider's billing department and ask to petition for debt relief. So part of this process might be that you have to apply or qualify for other medical programs like SNAP or a nutrition program similar to that. By the way, the links for that are going to be in the chat as well, because that's also a good thing to apply for. So you should be aware that some medical providers require you to at least have an application open for SNAP or similar medical or nutrition programs. So those two things probably should be done at the same time. Now, if you're employed or in school, you should be applying yourself to the Illinois CCAP, which is the child care program, to supplement child care costs. So if you have children and you are employed or you are in school, so those basically are the three qualifications. CCAP supplements and pays for a portion up to all of your child care costs. So if you are in a qualifying daycare or a qualifying summer school, things like that. Sarah's going to drop, one of our people are going to drop the information for that in the chat, but there is a local agency that can help you through that application process and also guide you. As a human being, you don't have to do it by yourself. So before we move on to affordable housing actions, I want to touch on the Pharah program, just because that's in-house for us, right? So the Pharah program is a rental program, of course, but it does provide utility assistance along with your rent. So utilities include, let's see if I can get this off the top of my head, gas, water, electric, sewer, trash, and internet. So that's what Pharah covers. There are other utility assistance programs, of course, and those would be accessed through your utility provider specifically. So a good thing to do is, let's say it's ComEd, you can say, ComEd, do you provide the ComEd Cares program, or is there any kind of program that would reduce my internet? There's the broadband assistance program right now. Whatever the utility provider is, contacting them specifically and saying, do you provide either a COVID-related or a need-based utility reduction system or a supplement program, something like that. Okay, next slide, please. Thank you so much. Okay, so now we're going to move on to rental programs. So there's a couple of rental programs in our area. This is kind of our expertise here at the Housing Authority. And some of these are aimed at those who are affected by COVID. Some have been around for some time. So let's touch on a couple of them. So right now, let's start with the court-based rental assistance program, or CBRA. So CBRA is only open to those who have an active eviction court case. I talked to a mediator yesterday, and they are saying that unfortunately the circumstances, if you're in court for an eviction case, it's so overwhelming and you're getting all this information thrown at you, and plus it's emotionally trying. So they watch a lot of folks go from the court and they bypass the rental assistance help desk because it's so much. So if you do find yourself in a situation where you are in the court under an eviction process, please be mindful that you actually have in-person help there, and they can help you either apply for the court-based rental assistance program or the other rental assistance programs based on COVID need. But if you're there, make sure you take advantage of that in-person help while you're there. So let's get back to the CBRA. It is open only for those who are in a current eviction court case and you're going to have to provide a summons or proof of that case in order to apply. If it's not already, they're going to drop it into the chat right now, so you know where to apply for that. ILRPP2 is another one. So that they recently closed the application window for ILRP2. ILRPP2, oh, it's a big acronym. However, they're starting to pay on that. So even though the application window is closed, if you've already applied, the agency that is running that program, IHDA, they should have already communicated to you on a way that you can check up on that application. They're starting to pay right now. So if you have applied for ILRPP2 with the IDA agency, you should either be receiving some sort of communication from them very soon, or the check. The check will either go towards your landlord most frequently, or to you if it's a direct payment. So the next one, of course, is the IDHS Housing Help Program. So that is accessed through the Illinois Department of Human Services. It's very similar to Pharah, but instead of offering 12 months, it offers 15 months of rental assistance, and it also provides some legal services to address landlord mediation and the eviction prevention. We're going to drop that IDHS into the chat right now, in case anybody wants to access that as well. So that one is open to all Illinois residents, not just Lake County. And then lastly, there are some non-COVID programs that existed before the pandemic, which were initiated to provide a way to mitigate housing instability. So that includes the statewide General Assistance Fund, funds through Cap Lake County, and the Emergency Assistance Program run by Catholic Charities. So in those situations, those are private non-COVID funds. They have an annual limit, what those agencies can spend per year, because there's only so much funding. And once it's spent, it's spent. So if you need assistance for those programs, you have to contact those specific agencies. And again, those agencies are going to be Cap Lake County, Catholic Charities, and your townships. That's the Emergency Assistance Program, your townships. All right, next slide, please. Thank you so much. Okay, so let's talk about affordable housing in Lake County for a little bit. And I know this is quite a huge monolithic topic, so let's break it down a little bit. We can actually divide these into two teams, right? So we've got the programs that provide the actual unit and the programs that provide funding. So let's talk about the units, right? So firstly, we have apartments and houses owned by the housing authorities, right? So in Lake County, this sounds so confusing, but I promise it'll make sense in a little bit. We've got 3 housing authorities, right? We have Waukegan Housing Authority that covers Waukegan. We've got North Chicago Housing Authority that covers North Chicago. And then we've got Lake County Housing Authority that covers everybody else. So there are buildings owned and operated by these public housing authorities. And if you want to apply for those units, you would go to the housing authority. So often these units are reserved for folks who are a particular age, whether that is 55 or older, 62 or older, or perhaps there are units reserved for disabilities. That genuinely depends on the program requirements from those housing authorities. So when you call up the housing authorities or go to our website, for example, you will find the requirements on the application itself. So we can drop the application in the chat, but we'll also make sure you can literally just go to any of those websites and you can apply online. So if you go to LCHA's website, there's going to be a little apply here up at the top. Same with Waukegan, same with North Chicago. Or you can call us up and ask for a paper application or visit our facilities when we open to the public again. Okay, so the next type of building is called LIHTC buildings, LIHTC. So LHTC stands for Low Income Housing Tax Credit Buildings. And that actually represents the lion's share of all of the affordable housing units in Lake County. These are privately owned, they're privately managed, they are not they're not associated with any government entity. And basically the owners are offered a tax incentive by the IRS to provide a certain number of units within their properties designated for those under a certain income cap. So they're found all over Lake County. Actually, they're found all over Illinois. And some are restricted to seniors, some are restricted to disabled folks, others are not. So LIHTC buildings, the units themselves, like I said, they're not government associated, but they are inspected by a particular agency, the same agency we mentioned before called IDA. So if you needed an inspection on those, you wouldn't call a housing authority, you wouldn't call a village, you would call IDA. So because they're all over the county and they're pretty much accessible to the largest population, they tend to have long waiting lists and somewhat low turnover. So if you're going to apply for a LIHTC building, I would recommend doing that rather soon. If you're facing a 12-month waiting list and maybe your current rent is being paid for by a Pharah program or an ILRPP program, now is the time if you want to apply for those LIHTC buildings just to accommodate that wait list. The way that those LIHTC buildings calculate your rent is typically based on a portion of your income, whether it is 30% or 40% of your income, depends on the property, but effectively it is entirely income based, so it's not market rent units. And then of course we're going to have links to these units in the chat so you can scroll through and see where those LIHTC properties are near you. Okay, so after the LIHTC buildings, we have some nonprofit owned buildings, right? In Lake County, there's a couple of organizations who rent their properties specifically to low-income households. And this includes the CPAH Libertyville, the Community Partners for Affordable Housing, Cool Ministries, and CAP Lake County. So links to these can be found in the chat. The rents for those properties are either established as a flat rate, like a low rent, flat rate, so cheaper than market rate, or again, based on the income of the tenant. So 30% of your income, 40% of your income, what have you. The organizations themselves, because they are not government affiliated, they're not HUD affiliated, they get to decide what the program requirements are. So perhaps they require you to be coming off of a drug rehabilitation program. Perhaps they require you to have minor children. Many have a requirement for employment or the ability to be employed. So consider that before you apply. But please do apply if you think that you would qualify and if you are seeking affordable housing. Okay, so let's switch to the other side of this slide, right? So we see subsidy programs. These are the programs that instead of providing those units that we just talked about, they provide the funding for a unit that you have already found. So when most people think of this type of funding, they think of what most people call Section 8. So that's not the term for it really anymore. It's an outdated term. It's kind of an umbrella term. Really what the term is right now is vouchers, right? So the voucher program, the housing choice voucher, or a series of specialty vouchers. Those are the ones that you would take to your landlord, and it's basically a subsidy coupon that says, hey, I'm going to pay a portion and the housing authority is going to pay a portion. No matter what, you as a landlord, you get your full rent paid, right? And it's a guaranteed rent. So there's this beautiful incentive for landlords to rent to people who have one of those vouchers. So the vouchers are issued and administered by the housing authorities. So the County Housing Authority, Waukegan Housing Authority, North Chicago Housing Authorities, all across the nation, right? In our area, it's just those three though. So there's a couple of voucher programs that exist to serve certain populations. The basic general vouchers, which everyone is familiar with, that's the one that's open to households making under a certain income. Frankly, it's the one that's most difficult to get because there's a lot of folks that qualify for it. And the moment that a waiting list is open, most people bum rush to get on that waiting list. Being on that waiting list does not mean you get a voucher. It just means you are holding a place in line to be qualified for that voucher. So there are other voucher programs that are specialty vouchers that exist to serve alternate populations. So those include things like family unification vouchers, which require a referral from DCFS. They include the VASH vouchers, which require a referral from the Veterans Administration, from the VA. And then there are newer vouchers in Lake County that exist to mitigate homelessness or housing instability. Those There's two types of those. One of them is called the MS5 voucher, and the other one is very recent, you might have heard about in the past 6 months, and it's called the Emergency Housing Voucher. The first one is the MS5, which existed before COVID, and that is limited to those who are under 62 years old and who are experiencing homelessness. The other newer voucher, that emergency housing voucher, was brought about during the pandemic, and it has less stringent requirements. The biggest requirement, of course, is that homelessness factor. HUD has a definition of homelessness that maybe I don't agree with, maybe is not what universally colloquially thought of as homeless, but it is rather strict. So the strictest version of the word homeless is what HUD uses to qualify a person for these vouchers. But the most recent emergency housing voucher has less strict requirements, and it has no age requirement. And the way you would access those homelessness designated vouchers is through PADS Lake County. You would go in, you'd be evaluated for one of these vouchers. LCHA or North Chicago or Waukegan would then issue you a voucher. You would go out into the universe, you would find a rental unit within the jurisdiction, and then the housing authority would begin paying on it, and you would pay your portion. So, like I was saying, what happens you get it, the key and critical is the landlord has to accept it. So in Lake County, if you have a voucher, the landlord does not need to accept it. And if you go to Cook County, there is something called source of income protection. They do need to accept it. But unfortunately, there's nothing that demands a landlord in Lake County accept that voucher. But if you did want to, if you do have a voucher and you did want a person to make the case for the voucher program, housing counselors here at LCHA are happy to do that. We do some landlord mediation as well. So effectively, you find a landlord to take the voucher, you sign a lease, you move in, housing authorities pay for the portion, you pay for your portion, and as long as you keep up with the lease and the family obligations, you can maintain that voucher for as long as you need it. All right, next slide, please. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the Pharah program. That is one that a lot of people are concerned about right now, and it is something that Lake County Housing Authority, specifically my department, runs. So as you know, this is a county program, or you may know, this is a Lake County specific program. It's only available to Lake County renters, and it is funded through the U.S. Treasury in response to the COVID pandemic. It provides 12 months of rental and utility assistance. And if you are moving at any point in time, it does provide 2 months of security deposit in order for you to move from one unit to another. The program is open to all of Lake County renters as long as they meet the criteria of the program, which includes attesting to a COVID impact and risk of homelessness. A COVID impact does not mean you have lost your job during COVID. It doesn't mean that you have had COVID. It means that you have been financially impacted by COVID in some way. So I can't imagine that anyone hasn't been financially impacted by COVID, either through reduced work hours or medical costs, or, you know, my children were at home learning throughout the pandemic because there was an outbreak at school. So there was additional cost in food and resources and blah, blah, blah. Also, to a point, many things have gone up in cost since COVID. So financially impacted by COVID is the key term here. There's also an income cap. So you cannot make above the particular income, and it is generous. And also the biggest one is the requirement of the lease or a landlord attestation. Obviously, you have to prove that you live within the unit and that there is a lease. Otherwise, there is no stability. And really the purpose of the program is to create that housing stability and to prevent homelessness in our area. So when we issue those funds, they're issued in 3-month blocks. So if you come to us, we will resolve the delinquent rent, but also provide 3 months of assistance going forward. If you need assistance beyond that, you have to come back, and we only issue future funds in 3-month chunks. And it is typically paid to the landlord. There are some special circumstances if the landlord refuses to participate in the program, that we will issue the funds directly to the tenant, but those are very rare circumstances. So typically it is issued, the funds are issued to the landlord themselves. If you want to begin your Pharah application, we're going to go ahead and put that link in the chat for you. Okay, so, and like I was saying earlier, Pharah does include an allotment for utility assistance. If you have, forgive me, if you have aged utility bills, and that is, again, gas, electric, water, trash, sewer, and internet. If you have those, we actually do need the bills to be owed in order to pay on them. So we can't pay a future invoice, but we can pay an invoice that has already been issued to you and it is due. All right, next slide, please. Thank you so much. Okay, so back to our overall goal here, which is to reduce expenses, figure out, of course, analyze your spending, figure out the areas that we can be reduced, and then increasing your income, right? So this is the third part of that process. After we've identified all the areas of our budget that can be eliminated, all the areas that can be reduced through assistance programs that we just discussed, or supplemented in some other way, and now we have established how much money we are going to need to survive, how much will meet the costs of those needs. It's time to look at the last step in the process, which is how can we increase the income? This is beneficial, not just for the emergency budget, but for the lifetime of you and your household. Keep in mind that no matter how you're increasing your income, there's going to be tax implications. So it's important to remember that. Most people, when they're in this emergency situation, it is just a matter of how do I make my bills? How do I blah, 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 blah. No matter how you increase your income, the IRS is going to take their cut. There was recently a newspaper article about a man being arrested on the federal level because he didn't pay taxes on the things he stole. So let's keep in mind, if the IRS wants you to pay taxes on the stuff you steal, they're going to want you to pay taxes on the income you're making legitimately. And we're going to aim for legitimate income, obviously. So you should absolutely take advantage, while we're talking about this, take advantage of the free tax preparation services, which we're going to link in the chat, by the way. And then again, if you do have any kind of housing subsidy, a voucher, or if you live in a LIHTC building and your income is reduced or increased through any of these programs, you're going to have to report that to your housing provider. So just keep that in the back of your mind. Tax preparation services are free. Take advantage of those. And if you ever have any kind of increase or decrease in income and you live in any type of subsidized housing whatsoever, report those income changes as soon as they happen. All right. Let's talk a little bit about the child tax credits and the enhanced child payments. So the enhanced child payments, which were on the federal level, that provided up to $300 per child, was recently expired in December, right before Christmas. There was some discussion about extending the program. Obviously, that has not happened. There's always some scuttlebutt about programs that are going to provide extra income for citizens. Until it happens and you've got those dollars in your hand, do not count on those. If you have children and you had not been issued those payments in 2021, the portal is closed. So the IRS has closed that portal and it's too late to apply for those back payments. However, it is still, you can still benefit from those tax credits on your taxes, right? So we're coming up on tax season. Some of you maybe have started your taxes, but most of us, I have not. Most of us have not. So when you're when you're looking at your taxes, make sure you're taking advantage of all the tax credits this year. So there's going to be a special allotment for those enhanced child payments. You can review those on your taxes with your tax professional, but make sure you ask or you apply for the earned income tax credits, right? This is one that's available to low or moderate employed persons who do or do not have minor children. So obviously the child tax credits are just for folks with children who are minors, but the earned income tax credit is for those who do or do not, it doesn't matter. So you can find the links to these specific topics as well in the chat, as well as the portal itself and information on the child tax credits and the earned income tax credits. So if you're employed and you receive a pay stub, it's always important to review your payroll deductions for areas that increase your monthly income. Basically, if you want to increase your take-home pay. A lot of folks, they join a job, they put down, they fill out their paperwork, and then it's gone, right? You can update that once a year. You can update that more frequently than that, as long as your HR representative is open to it, right? Before doing this, you're going to have to determine if your household is better served by an increased monthly income or that large refund check at the end of the year. This is really personal and circumstantial to whatever your household operates on. And as housing counselors, we have to take into thought that some households genuinely depend on that once a year tax refund to make savings, as a Christmas fund. There's many uses for it. Some people use it as a savings account, or as a safety net. So there's a couple of approaches. In the chat, they're going to be dropped a link to the IRS's tax withholding estimator, and you can use that to gauge whether or not you want to increase your tax withholdings to get that larger payment at the end of the year, or decrease your tax withholdings to get a monthly payout that's larger. So basically your take-home pay is going to be a little larger than it was. Sometimes there's enough within that tax withholder for you to execute that additional changes and actually get some life-changing funds back per month. So there is one thing missing from that estimator they don't address whatsoever, and that is whether or not your employer considers you an independent contractor or an employee. So this is something that I don't think a lot of folks talk about, and it's a simple designation that's going to determine what your tax burden is at the end of the year. And the difference is this: an employee shares the burden of the federal taxes that are taken out of your paycheck every time you get paid, right? So that includes your federal income tax, if your state income tax, whatever that is. For an employee, a payroll tax is 15.3% of your gross wages, but it's split between you and your employer. That's if you're an employee. If you are a contractor, you share, there's no sharing. You shoulder the burden of that entire 15.3%. So unfortunately, some unscrupulous employers will designate you as a contractor when you are not. And that means they don't have to pay those that share of those federal taxes. And you end up shouldering that entire 15.3% burden. So in the chat, we're going to drop a link that's going to help you determine if you are falsely being categorized as a contractor versus an employee. And maybe if it's not happening to you, please just talk about this with your people, talk about it with your friends and family, maybe just light conversation, because to a point it's happening more and more nowadays. It's a tactic unscrupulous people are using to avoid paying federal taxes. So next slide, please. Perfect. Okay, so now we're going to talk about increasing employment, right? The gig economy is big right now, and there are so many ways to increase your employment through the gig economy, through legitimate gig jobs in your off time, or if you want to do this full time, even good. So many of these are app-based and rely on the individual to perform calculable tasks, and those include things like handyman services, dog walking, delivering goods, reselling on a variety of platforms like Facebook Marketplace or Etsy. So if you sign up for any of these gig jobs, please understand that they are going to charge you a fee, whether it's a percentage of the delivery or if it is a set fee per what have you, like Etsy does or like eBay does. They're going to get their cut. So one thing you're going to ask yourself before you go through all of this and sign up for 1 or 2 or 5 of these gig jobs is if you're going to make more money working at your normal job overtime. So if your employer offers overtime, if you're able to take advantage of it, is it going to cost you less in your own time and expenses to work that overtime, or are you going to financially benefit more after all the taxes, fees, everything like that from these gig jobs? Are you going to benefit more from doing gig work? Or to a point, even if the income is fine, mentally, are you going to do better working a gig job or working your employer for overtime. So that's something you're going to have to define within yourself. And again, housing counseling is happy to help you make those calculations and help you work out those on a one-on-one basis. Always beforehand, please make sure that whatever gig job you're working, it is legal, legitimate, and safe. Safe, 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 safe. You don't want to go into somebody's home and have it be an unsafe environment. Next slide, please. So now we're going to look at skilled jobs, right? So skilled jobs, when we talk about this, we're going to talk about those side hustles that come from our own talents, our passions, our skills. And I am convinced that everybody has a marketable skill. I don't care if it's resume writing, if it's photography, if you are refurbishing furniture, if you're designing a website, if you're doing somebody's wedding invitations, whatever it is, right? The key is you have to research if the skilled job you are doing that you're trying to make money on requires a license, formal training, a certification, something like that, right? For example, before I started this job, I knew a lot about finance. I have a great history in it, and that's my background, right? And I certainly gave advice to my friends and my family, but when I began working here at the Housing Authority, I had to be certified as a housing counselor. If I did not get certified, I don't get to bill HUD for my hours, right? And to a point, if HUD ever found out that we lost our certification, we would be shut down. So this is the same thing with a lot of these jobs, right? So common side gigs, things like doing nails, braiding, childcare, tax prep is a big one. A lot of folks are selling their skills at tax prep, and you do need some sort of license to do that, right? Before you start advertising yourself, either between friends, social media, etc., do your research. Just make sure that your area of skill does or does not require that license, right? You can also, if you wanted to, you can look up, if you're trying to take advantage of another friend's skill or a stranger's skill, you can look up the job type or the individual on the Illinois Department of Financial and Professional Regulations, which we're going to drop into the chat, the link to get to that. And that way you can either research if you're going to need that license, or you can research if a person that you want to go to for those things has that license. Like, for example, if you're going to a tax prep service, you want to make sure those people have a certificate and that they're trained. Next slide, please. Thank you so much. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit too about MLMs and work scams. And sadly enough, every time there's a major crisis economically, we see these things coming out of the woodworks, right? So MLMs, multi-level marketing schemes, and pyramid schemes take a little bit of different forms, but they're kind of pervasive, right? Variety of products. And that can be anything from clothing to vitamins to, financial services, investment services, right? But there are some telltale signs on how to differentiate between like an MLM and a legitimate business that's not going to be predatory. So a good way of determining if it is an MLM is that firstly, the product is not sold in stores. So if I could find this product in the store, could it sell by itself, or do I need to sell this to someone else, right? Secondly, and most importantly, is the salary you're drawing from this organization based on your sales, or is it based on recruiting other folks to come join this organization? So really sit down. You should be provided with when you sign your contract for the organization, whatever it is. If you're selling, let's say, children's leggings, you should be provided with a contract, and that's going to give you a sales structure and a benefit structure and a salary structure. And if you'll notice, you can go through it and you can say, oh, most of my salary from this, most of my income from this is not actually based on sales. It's based on recruiting people below me. That's an indication that's an MLM. Traditionally, those do not actually bring you any income. You end up spending more money outright than you would ever come in. We're going to drop a link in the chat to the FTC's information on MLMs and pyramid schemes, and you can use to make your own decisions about where you want to invest your money, etc. Okay, so there are also a few employment scams out there right now that I want to make you aware of. Most of them require a potential employee to either pay to apply or purchase a product or purchase equipment or submit to some sort of down payment to secure that employment. So a lot of the times this is justified with the wording that you have to invest in this company to make money, right? This is not standard practice. And most of us know this, right? Most of our guts kind of react to this as well. But the question you should be asking yourself while confronted with that specific rationale that you have to invest to make some money is, will I get this investment back if I choose to take off, right? If I choose to relieve myself from this financial burden, will I get that money back? And also, who makes a profit from this investment? Is it me? Is it somebody else? If it's not you, you're not investing, you're being scammed. So please just keep that in mind. Even with legitimate employers though, like where I work, etc., what we all consider legitimate employees, there can be instances of fraud, intentional or otherwise. So most commonly, wage theft and time theft is prevalent, and that takes the form of unpaid overtime, under the table payments, misclassification, like we talked about earlier, as an independent contractor, or being forced to pay before your work shift begins. So if you believe yourself to be the victim of wage or time theft, please contact the Illinois Department of Labor. You can also self-advocate to your employer as well, but if it does go to this extent, you can contact the Illinois Department of Labor, which we're going to be dropping a link in the chat. And lastly, let's take a look at work from home scams. So this has become, unfortunately, more common through COVID because more people are remote working, right? So the idea is out there, and that's what the scammers leak onto. So, and likewise, it also tends to impact the most vulnerable households who are desperate for a solution to keep safe during COVID and also maintain that income. So work from home scams are sometimes set up to gather personal data, and that's it. So you enter in your social, you enter in your date of birth, your address, all of this personal information. And there really is no job or there is no interview that comes out of it. It's literally just a personal data mining situation, and you're just entering your own stuff voluntarily. And granted, an employer could ask for this. This is not necessarily out of the realm of possibility if you're applying for a job. So what do you do in this situation? If you're going to apply for a job, your best friend in this situation is going to be your internet search tool, whether it's Google or Bing or what have you. You want to really search that employer. So if I was going to be searching, if I was applying to the Lake County Housing Authority, I was going to look up if they have a physical address, if they have a, what kind of experiences folks have, that if there's any kind of report that this is a scam employer, what their history as an employer is. You can even look up their FEIN number through the government websites, etc. You can see if they have a social media page, if all the things you would expect from that employer in that industry exists, right? So especially if that potential scammer asks you for a personal check or offers you a check before you actually execute any work, before you do any work, this is an indication of a scam as well. And that's like a check exchange scam, or to a point, if you're offering them money, it's just they're taking your money. If this has already happened to you, please reach out to the FTC or the Illinois State's Attorney's Office, and they'll be able to guide you through the process of either opening up a case or trying to retrieve that funds back. Next slide, please. Okay, so we're reaching the end, I promise. If you are considering taking this moment in time to open a small business, which a lot of folks are doing right now, it's very encouraging and I love it. I love to see small businesses thrive. If you are interested in that, Lake County has a very active small business development center. It is located at the College of Lake County. I believe it's at the Grays Lake facility, or the Waukegan facility, forgive me. So they have a bunch of programs, including one-on-one counseling, SMA workshops, classes, a bunch of terrific resources, and they are solely designed to promote small business development. It is a nationwide program. It's not just in Lake County. So if you ever move away and you're still interested in forming a small business, please reach out to your local small business development center. Fabulous resources. And of course, next slide, please. Of course, while we're all here today, the wonderful Job Center, and I'm gonna be quiet after this slide and let the Job Center take over, but I would encourage you all to take advantage of the Job Center as well. I am constantly wowed by the resources they have there, the classes they offer, just the intense personal way they look at resumes and link a person with employers. It's beautiful. But anyway, I will be quiet and let Rasan take over. And again, we're going to be taking questions after all this is done. Thank you so much for letting me speak.
Thank you, Liz. What a wealth of information that you have given us today. Hello, everyone. My name is Rasan Grant, and I'm the Career Resource Specialist here at the Job Center of Lake County. Currently, we work with 14 partners that contribute to the Center of Lake County Job Center. We can assist you with job search and your career transition. Keep in mind that we work with laid off workers. We work with individuals receiving public assistance or housing subsidy. We can help you with these specialized programs, people with disabilities, youth 24 and younger, people of age 55 or better, and people who have legal issues. We also service our military veterans as well. They have priority services here at the Job Center. Also, some of the other things that we help you with is we can help you apply for education or training scholarships, public energy or emergency assistance, and even housing assistance. Our partners can help you complete a short-term certificate or degree. You can participate in a paid internship, take high school equivalency tests, or even learn English as a second language. Staff members here at the Lake County Job Center and Illinois Department of Employment Security work full-time here. They can connect you with any of our Job Center partners, so please ask for a referral when you contact us. You can also find about our services that we offer on our website. It's listed at lakecountyjobcenter.com. You can view our calendar of items. We offer monthly workshops, so please don't let this be your last workshop. Sign up for one of our workshops. Some of our core workshops that we do offer are on resume writing. So if you're in need of creating and designing that resume, join that workshop. We also offer one for accelerate your job search. Also, another workshop that we offer is mastering the virtual interview. So please view our calendar on our website and sign up for our workshops as well. They're free. Also, you can contact us at the number listed here at 847-377-3450. If you're looking to do computer research as far as seeking a job, give us a call. Those time slots are by appointment only, so you would have to contact us by phone. Also, you can visit us on our social media site at Job Center of Lake County IL. Please go to our social media platforms. Those are updated twice daily, sometimes 3 times by our social media guru, Ashanti Ross. So go out there and like, subscribe, and share on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube. We're glad that you joined us today. This has been a wealth of knowledge, and I will open it up for questions. Just keep in mind, you will receive a copy of this presentation using the email that you registered. It will be in a PDF format for you to view and to access the links. Also, we would value your feedback today. So please share your feedback with us by completing the survey that will be emailed to you today. And once again, we thank you again for joining us.